afternoon, everyone. And we're really pleased to see you all here, to hear an address by the Director of Housing and Community Development for the City of Houston, Tom McCasland. But first, I'd just like to take a few moments and certainly welcome you to the Barbara Jordan Mickey Leland School of Public Affairs. I want to recognize our interim dean, Dr. Michael Adams, and also the interim chair of the Department of Urban Planning and Environmental Policy, who's sponsoring this event, Professor Cherie Smith, who is taking pictures. I am Professor Jeffrey Lowe of the Department of Urban Planning and Environmental Policy. And our department is really committed to carrying out, and I should say the school in general, we're really committed to fulfilling TSU's mission as a special designation education, institution of higher education, And as part of that mission, we really see ourselves focusing on not just educating students to meet the challenges of the 21st century, but also bringing in community, meeting and assisting and facilitating the needs of our surrounding community, Houston, the nation, and the world. And so we're really happy to have Tom to be here today to really talk about Houston and to talk about the state of housing and community development for our city, the fourth largest city in the nation. Prior to working for the city of Houston, Tom served as the CEO for the Harris County Housing Authority. His efforts ultimately guided the Housing Authority back from the brink of bankruptcy, reducing operating expenses by nearly 50%, improving services to clients, and increasing salaries for the Housing Authority's lowest paid employees. He also worked with the Houston Parks Board on successful legislation, funding mechanisms, and grant applications related to a $500 million expansion of linear parks and trails along Harris County's 10 major bayous. Tom received his bachelor's degree from Hobie Sound Bible College, a master's degree from Baylor University, and a doctor of jurisprudence from Yale School of Law. So for many of us, certainly here in urban planning, where we're really concerned about the improvement of quality of life for all of our citizens, and where the natural environment meets the built environment, I think we will all appreciate that he's an avid cyclist, runner, and public transit rider. So at this time, I present to you Tom McCasland.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe. It's terrific to be here. I think I am mic'd, so I don't have to stay behind the podium the entire time, but we may move back and forth. But I am honored to be at the Barbara Jordan Mickey Leland School of Public Affairs. These are two legends that I've heard of. Never had the privilege of meeting either one of them, but it's an honor to be here talking about housing and community development in the city of Houston. Dr. Lowe does lay out quite a challenge when he asks me to speak about the state of housing and community development in the city of Houston. I feel wholly underprepared to do that for a number of reasons. He just gave you rundown on my education, and there wasn't a lot in Bible college or a master's degree in philosophy or even a law degree prepared you for this position. So I often walk into the room, and I am seldom the subject matter expert in the room, and I know even in this room there are a lot of subject matter experts who are sitting in the audience. So I will not presume to talk to you about the philosophical or even the policy pieces when it comes to the state of housing in the city. But I do want to give you some background about what it is like to be a practitioner, what it is like to be a government bureaucrat. And I use that word very seriously because I think the work of government is absolutely crucial for the topic that we are talking about today, which is increasing the stock of affordable homes and making sure that the necessary community development goes along with that. So that's the background. I'm going to kind of set the stage initially. I'll walk through a number of initiatives that we're working on, and then close with some discussions around some of the things that we expect to be coming in the upcoming months and years under the current mayor, and then give plenty of time for questions. Dr. Rowe, you'll be flagging me when I'm running out of time. Maybe giving me a 5-minute warning or something. Okay, perfect. Let's start. Let's see, where do I point this? Do I need to point it maybe there? Towards. Let's see here. Well, I can always forward it manually if we need to. Right now, this is it. Okay. Yeah, I'll forward it for you. Okay. So let's start with a look at defining the problems we're attempting to solve. And as a first issue, let's look at defining affordability. A lot of folks ask, what does it mean to be affordable? And I'm going to work with a very standard definition that an affordable home is one that costs less than 30% of the household income. This is a standard definition that the federal government has been using for a while. It's varied over the years, and there are reasons why in certain situations you can be living in a place that is not affordable. If you are literally homeless and have no income, then 30% of zero income is probably a place that's free to live. But as a working definition, we'll start with that. And then what does that mean practically? Because percentages don't really tell us very much. If you're working a federal minimum wage job in the city of Houston, full-time, your annual income is just over $15,000. It means that at 30% you can afford something around $377. And I think if any of you have been out in the rental market in the city of Houston recently, you know that there are very, very few units of any quality that are available at that price point. If we go up to a family of 4 at 80% of the area median income, if you take our median income and then take 80% of that, that is what HUD defines as moderate income. So if you're making right at $55,350, you qualify under that definition in our area, and an affordable rent for that family of 4 would be just under $1,400. So one is someone who's at the very low end. This other is someone. Just pointing it. Okay. And so this gives you a range of the folks that we are attempting to serve. And I use 80% because the vast majority, as you'll see in just a minute, the vast majority of our funding at the city comes from the federal government. And almost all of that must be spent on either neighborhoods or households that are at this 80% area median income and below. If you're in a smaller household, that annual income will drop. If you're in a larger household, of course, that annual income will increase. Before we get too much further into some of the programs that we're looking at, I want to just give you a few slides, and I'm presuming that most of us who are interested in this topic, these slides won't shock you, but there are plenty of folks in the city of Houston who have not been to some of the forgotten communities. Communities that have seen underinvestment for decades. Communities where the city of Houston's only real investment has been demolition of single-family homes as those communities have been devastated and as people have moved out. So this is what people live in. Senior citizens, disabled individuals are living in homes where the roofs are caving in. You can see sunshine through the walls. There's sometimes not electricity. There's plumbing issues. That means they cannot use the indoor plumbing. And even in our multifamily complexes that are being rented that should be inspected by our code enforcement, you see things like this. And this is from a apartment complex that is habited, not one that is boarded up and empty. So we have our work cut out for us, and the problems that we are trying to solve actually impact people's lives, not just in the quality of life sense, but in the fact that if we don't solve these problems, these people's lives will be cut short because of their the strictures, the fact that they don't have access to affordable homes. A quick look at some of the data. So I was talking about area median income, and this is a family income, 0 to 30%. For those you have in the city of Houston, and this is coming from the ACS data that's done, so this is a little bit dated at this point, but 33,000 homeowners in the city of Houston and almost 105,000 renters in the city of Houston. If you go to that next category, 31 to 50%, and the poverty levels don't quite track 30% area median income, but as a general rule, you can anyone who is 30% area median income and below is either at or very close to the poverty level from a federal guidelines perspective. 31% to 50%, you see the homeowners go up a little bit to 38,000, and the renters drop a little bit to 77,000, and then 51 to 80% area median income. Homeowners go up even more to 53, and renters go up a bit as well to 86,000. All in, we're looking at about 392,000 households in the city of Houston that would fall into this low and moderate income category based upon HUD's definition. Now let's look at for a moment at what's available. And there was just a conversation that the Kinder Institute hosted along with LISC, and they were looking at some of the data. I'll flag some of the places where the data on here is not as clean as I wish it were, but these are good round numbers, and they're working numbers for us. Let's say that, even though they may not be exact numbers. Single-family units, these are homes, single-family homes that are provided to low and moderate income folks. The ones that are under our affordability period, and so would be limited to someone at a low and moderate income, we're looking at just under 2,000 households. Public housing, this one actually overlaps with the low-income housing tax credit and is closer to just under 4,000 households. The remaining 1,500 actually goes into the low-income housing tax credit from the Houston Housing Authority. But these are the units that are 100% for very low-income individuals. City-funded non-low-income housing tax credit, and I'll say a bit about the low-income housing tax credit in a minute. These we have a good number on, and that is just about 5,000 units there. And then your multifamily low-income housing tax credit. This is a source of funding for units, and it is built both by for-profit, nonprofit developers, and the affordability period varies from 15 years to sometimes up to 30 years. This is why it's hard to get a handle on this. For the ones that we know are under the affordability period, it's about 7,000. I'm estimating that there's another 5,000 or 6,000 in there that are probably still under the affordability period in the city of Houston. But that's the one that I have the biggest question on in terms of the actual number. And then vouchers. These are vouchers that are run by both housing authorities. The City of Houston's Housing Authority uses vouchers to subsidize rents in the private market. And within the City of Houston, if you're counting both Harris County Housing Authority and the City of Houston Housing Authority, you have just over 13,000 vouchers inside the city. The Houston Housing Authority still has a significant number of housing vouchers that are outside the city, and I'm not counting those, so I'm just counting the data that they have where those people are renting inside the city. So that's a quick look at some of the big background. And I want to stop and take a moment to think about what, as a city, our assigned tasks should be. As governmental entities, we get pots of money, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, and the various pots so that we can talk through some of those details. But you hear stories about how a governmental entity got, let's say for round figures, $100 million, and then they were, they've had it for a while, and then they didn't spend it. And as someone who's not in the city or not in the governmental entity, it's hard to imagine how you can not spend money until you get in there and start working through the details. And I still agree that it's hard to imagine how you cannot spend some of this money, but when you start layering on city regulations with federal regulations, with state regulations, and you're working with a federal bureaucracy and sometimes a state bureaucracy and the city bureaucracy, and then you layer on top of that community opposition, and then you throw in a couple of other issues that can slow things down. I'm not making excuses here for governmental entities that can't spend money, but it starts to make sense a little bit, the struggles and the difficulties they're up against. So I say that as background because oftentimes when you walk into governmental entities, and I had this experience that both governmental entities I've walked into, the first priority is spend the money. Don't violate any HUD guidelines, any federal guidelines, and meet your deadlines. And if you can do that, you can pat yourself on the back, you've had a good day, and you can go home. But I'm encouraging our folks at the city to begin to think about the task that's been presented to us as something different. And rather than thinking about spending particular discrete funds, to start asking ourselves, what are the problems we should be solving? What are the problems that this money was sent to us to solve? And how can we define that? How can we wrap our heads around that problem and begin to address that problem with the resources that we have? Not only the money that we have from the federal government, but the rest of the money that's out there in the private sector, in the nonprofit world, and so on. And I honestly do think that our assigned task should be, and the mayor has made it clear to me, that it is to solve Houston's affordable housing crisis. One of the things I forgot to mention, and let me just click back, but I realized I never, when I added in the low-income housing tax credits, I didn't add in, so the total should be $36,349. But if you flip back here, you still see that's less than 30% of the overall need. I'm sorry, less than 10% of the overall need. Now, again, there's a little bit of data issues with this slide. And maybe it's at 10%, maybe it's just over 10%, but we're somewhere in the ballpark of solving or providing affordable homes to about 10% of the households who need affordability. So when I say we have an affordable housing crisis, I don't think that's an overstatement. And as we move forward, as the inner loop begins to densify, as we see more luxury apartments coming, as we see just a few blocks from here, townhomes that cost $500,000 and $600,000. I don't think this affordable housing crisis is going to lessen unless we change the tactics and change our approach to it from something different than what we've been doing for the last few decades. So that's my starting assumption, and then what we do about it is where I'd like to go in just a minute. Before we go there, a few more data points. And this is coming from the NYU Furman Center Capital One National Affordable Housing Rental Landscape Report from last year, so this is relatively recent data. Houston rental population increased 37% from 06 to 2014. Another statistic, I don't have it here, but it's about 41% of our overall population, of the overall number of households, are rental households in the city of Houston. 34% of renter households live in single-family homes. And of the major markets, Houston is the second most affordable rental market. Now that's the good news. Let me pause there to say affordability is beginning to take an increasingly important role in our public conversations. And there are a number of reasons why I think that's the case. But we've been living under the myth that Houston is an incredibly affordable city. And as compared to a lot of other major cities like New York and San Francisco, Houston still is, as compared to those cities, affordable. But one of the points that I think we need to be aware of is that our affordability crisis didn't begin when, moderate income households in Montrose begin to be priced out of those neighborhoods. We've had neighborhoods where safe, affordable, secure households have not been affordable for generations, and that's been true going all the way back. So while it's true that if you compare to the major cities, we still are relatively affordable, I don't want to overstate that case, and we don't have to drive very far to see that people have not been choosing to live in certain neighborhoods because they like living in homes that are falling down like the homes we just looked at. But they're doing that because they cannot afford anything better. And if that's the case, we have a significant problem on our hands. Now, going to some of the more serious issues, 49% of our renters are moderately or severely rent burdened. Moderately rent burdened, going back to our definition of what is affordable, is someone who's paying between 30% of their household income up to 50% of their household income on their rent. Severely rent burdened is any household that's paying more than 50% of their rent of their income on rent. If you look at this, 20% of all renters are severely rent burdened. And then if you drop down to the lowest income quartile, so the 0 to 25% of the income quartile, 76%, this is not for the city, this is for the metro area, 76% of our metro area renters in the lowest income quartile are severely rent burdened, paying more than 50% of their household income on rent. And it is not difficult to find households that are working households, they have a job, and they're paying 80, 90, and sometimes 100% of their income on rent. And you ask, how do they live? Well, they're living on nonprofit charity, and they're living on other subsidy, but their homes are not being subsidized. They're paying full market rate for their rent. I spoke of the forgotten communities, and I want to. This next phase really walks through some of the proposals that we are thinking about. The good news is this first proposal is not something we're thinking about. It's something that we are over halfway done with. But on my very first day on the job, the mayor looked at me and said, "How many homes do we have with blue tarps on the roofs?" And I said, "I don't know, Mayor." And he said, "Well, I've been told we don't have any." And I said, "Well, I know that's not the case because I've seen them around. But we'll find out." So we went out, started with GIS data, looked down from the GIS maps, counted theirs, and did windshield tours. And we came up with somewhere in the 1,700 number of blue tarps we could identify throughout the city. And then we went back to the mayor with a plan to get the roofs taken care of. And you can see here are some of these homes that started off with blue tarps and now have new roofs courtesy of the city. Why start with the roofs? If you have a home that someone has paid for, and many of these homes don't have mortgages on them, they've kept up with the rent, they don't have title issues, but rain is coming into the home, you're losing money every time it rains because that home is deteriorating, and a $7,000 new roof on here is one of the cheapest ways you can provide affordable homes in the city. And so we took it as a triage method. I won't say many because we don't have the good data on this, but many of the people I talked to had damage that dated back to Hurricane Ike. Many of those folks, if they did not keep a good tarp on their roof, their homes we were not able to save them. You could not save the roof. But we did identify the number of homes, and these were the numbers that we came up with. The number of blue tarps is actually a little higher than this, and the 1,700. We identified about 844 potential candidates. These numbers are in flux because we still have phone calls coming in. We've received 566 applications. We've approved for construction 341. We still have about 160 applications in-house that are being processed. And we've completed 241 roofs on the homes. This is an example I'd like to offer as a crisis that has been sitting around. We've had money that we could do this. It's a lot of roofs. It's a lot of work to go out and identify these homes. But it was an example of identifying a problem, putting your head around that problem, defining it, funding it, and then going out and accomplishing it. And I'm asked regularly by both city council folks as well as people in the community, what's the deadline for application? And my response is the deadline for application is the last day that there is a blue tarp on a roof for someone who's income qualified, and we can take it down. And that should be the answer. And I want to stop there because a lot of our housing, a lot of the homes that are affordable in this city are provided in the sense that you have to hit the lottery in order to qualify. In fact, and this is not a criticism, our housing authorities, and I worked at a housing authority for 4 years, but our housing authorities are so overwhelmed with applications when they open their wait list that they have to use a lottery to choose, literally use a lottery to choose who's going to get those vouchers and go on the wait list to wait. If you're working with the city, frequently it is you get a new house that's $150,000, $170,000, or you continue to live in one of those homes that we looked at. And so it's this sharp dichotomy between those who are lucky enough to be in the right time at the right place and get on the right wait list, or people who are absolutely desolate and are living in places that are life-threatening for them. And as a community, we need to get away from the notion that affordable homes is something that you need to just get lucky enough and have, and it should be something that we can provide for all of our income-eligible families throughout the city. So that's the blue tarp. It's ongoing. We are anticipating being done with the new roofs sometime within the next 2 to 3 months. The one issue that is an outstanding issue is getting in contact with some of the folks. When we went out initially, showed up in a city car and walked up with a badge around your neck and knocked on the doors, a lot of people didn't want to come to the door because usually when the city comes and knocks on your door, they're not there to offer you a new roof. They're there to fine you for having a hole in your wall, or to tell you you need to cut your weeds, or something else has gone badly wrong. They're not there to help you. And so there was a lot of cynicism, a lot of skepticism when we initially approached them. We're still attempting to reach about 240 of these homes. And these are homes that we're pretty sure, or it can't always be sure, but we're pretty sure that people actually live in, offering them a new roof. And there's been some folks that for whatever reason have turned us down. And this is a trust issue that we have to overcome as a city. It's a trust issue that we as a city government have created over time. And I'm not pushing the blame on this for anyone else, but it's something that has been a challenge. Setting that challenge aside, we expect to be done with this roof program, at least have the bulk of them through the process within the next 2 to 3 months. But this was also an opportunity for our city staff to realize that there's a real role for us as governmental employees to go out and be proactive. Not to start a program, put it on our website, and wait for applications to come in, but literally to be out there knocking on doors with the application saying, I'm here to help you fill this application out. Let's get you a new roof. The good news, and I need to run these numbers again because we're about 3 months, I guess, we're nearly done with 3 months into the new year. 3 months from the last year, the lag was an average of 22 days. So from the time your application was complete, we sent it over, and 22 days later, you had a new roof on your home. That's the kind of turnaround we need. Our home buyer assistance program. When I got to the city of Houston, we had a home buyer assistance program. It had been around for a while. This is a program that pays for down payment assistance, or down payment, a portion of your down payment, pays for closing costs, and can pay down a portion of the price of the home. In the preceding 12 months prior to me getting here, we had provided 13 families with assistance in the fourth largest city in the U.S. That's a failure of a program. I'm not going to say it's a failure simply on government employees, but there were some problems there that we had to fix. But there was also a problem with the way we were structuring the program. So we've restructured it, and we'll see if it works. But the program is, if you're 80% area median income or below, $15,000 of subsidy, $70,000 or below, $25,000 of subsidy. And your commitment to the city is that you live in this home for at least 5 years. If you're once you do that, the home is yours free and clear. Now, this is a program that we ran for a while, and I reference this because we have been building homes either through disaster recovery funding or through neighborhood stabilization funding. And we've been subsidizing these new homes for about $140,000. Area median income was usually 50 to 120%, and we required the families to live there for 7 to 15 years. Again, this is a questionable way to start to frame a policy, because if on this, not on this program, but on a similar program, we were only providing homes for seniors. So we had seniors at 80, 85 years old coming in, and we were giving them the requirement to live in that home for 15 years, otherwise they would lose our subsidy. So there's a mismatch there between the age of the person you're helping and the subsidy and the requirements of the subsidy that's being provided. So I mentioned that because going back to the original homes that we looked at, I estimate at this point we have at least 500, likely closer to 1,000 seniors living in homes that I would consider life-threatening. They're not stable. They cannot be rehabbed because the rehab would cost more than the replacement. And they are contributing to that senior's poor health and will likely cut years off of their life if they do not get into better housing. So one of the things that we are piloting, and I say piloting because if it works, we'll do more of it, and if people don't like it, if it doesn't work, we'll do less of it. But can we put together a $45,000 cottage that we can offer to someone at the back of their lot that they own, get them out of the home that's full of mold, that doesn't have good plumbing and so on, and do that in a way that just provides them that subsidy. They don't have to live there. It's something that's theirs immediately the day they move in, and we can do it at a cost that's about 1/3 of what it would cost to do the full home development. Now, I'm not getting away from the full home development, and I'll say more about that in a minute, but we're looking at the possibility of being able to bring in, maybe in a way that's already manufactured, a cottage that we can provide to someone immediately, because that's the urgency of the problem we're trying to solve. We can't be putting together a plan that will help these people in 5 years or 10 years, because then they will quite literally no longer be here, and we will not have provided them the kind of place they deserve to live out the last years of their life. But ultimately, and this is where Dr. Lowe and I think, first got introduced, was around the idea of community land trust. Community land trusts have been around 30, going on 35, almost 40 years, and they've been used successfully throughout the rest of the country to provide affordability for the long run. They're usually run by a nonprofit, and rather than a 5 or 10 year, or in the case of multifamily, 15 or 30 year affordability period, once the unit is on the ground, the unit is affordable forever, and that land remains used even well after the life of the home that's built on it. The land still stays in the land trust, where it can only be used for housing or some other community public interest, depending upon the way the trust is set up. These are complicated issues. If you want to know the details, grab Dr. Lowe and ask him the details afterwards, because he's the expert in the room on this. But just to walk through this very, very quickly. The land, as I mentioned, is owned, I have a point, I think I have a pointer here, maybe. The land is owned by the trust forever, so the notion is once you purchase the land, you never give up ownership. The buildings, let's set the funding side apart from it for a moment. The buildings are owned by individuals. In the case of multifamily, they might be owned by a nonprofit. But let's take the single-family home ownership. So they only pay for the structure and not the underlying land, and that's the way you immediately get some affordability in here. I'm going to come back to that point in a moment. And so you make it affordable for someone to come in. Let's take for round figures a home that costs $150,000 to build. Let's say it gets built on a $30,000 lot. So if you were going to do that at market, assuming that the market is actually building those units in that area, it would be a $180,000 home. You take the land price out, you leave that in the trust, you make it a $150,000 home, and the homeowner agrees that when they no longer need it, they're going to resell it at a formula that makes it affordable for the next person at their income level to come in and purchase it. They get a ground lease for 99 years. It's renewable for another 99 years. And that's even though the families who live in these homes usually only live in them about 7 years. Same for the market. In the market, homeowners, on average, there for 7 years. And in land trusts, it's the very same thing. This 99-year lease that they get on the land ensures that the home is used for affordable home ownership, regardless of what happens around it. You can have the $500,000 townhome come in next to this $150,000 home, and 10 years from now, let's say it's a $2,000 uptick per year for the person who lives there. 10 years from now, that $150,000 home sells for $170,000 for someone that's also income eligible. If they've been paying their mortgage regularly, they're likely going to have paid down about $20,000 of equity. That person is going to leave this community land trust unit with a $40,000 nest egg. And here's the real kicker: 70% of community land trust homeowners go on to be homeowners in the private market. The other fact that I like to throw in here is that at the height of the recession, when foreclosures were through the roof, foreclosures in community land trust were 1/10 of the foreclosures in the market, 1/10 of the foreclosures. So it's a model that works. It's not a model that is good for every situation, and it's a model that needs to be used carefully. But in some fashion, if we need to be ensuring that if the city puts money into an affordable unit, that affordability is going to be there for a while. So let's come back to the price point. Nothing stops the city from saying, we want to put another $50,000 of subsidy into this, because Here's someone who can only afford a $100,000 mortgage. They've got good credit. They can bring the mortgage to cover that. So we're going to put $50,000 of subsidy in, bring that price point down to $100,000, and now it's $100,000 of affordability that's protected forever, not $150,000. So you have some real flexibility here in terms of making sure that you're getting the price points at the point that you need for it to be affordable at 30% of that household's income. On our multifamily, if you look at our subsidized units versus our unsubsidized units, you can see that the subsidized units are a tiny fraction of what's out there. I mentioned this because there's this thing that in the housing world we call naturally occurring affordable homes. The vast majority of those, that 90%, the 90% of the folks who are not living in subsidized homes are either living in these units. If they're living at the same rate as others, it's probably about 50% of them living in these units. The other 50% living in home ownership units that are in disrepair, and I'm guessing on those percentages. But this 321,000 units of market apartment complexes is where they're living. And so on the multifamily housing initiative, there are two things that we're working on. One is the deconcentration of poverty. How do we take concentrated poverty and move it to in a deconcentrated way? And the other one is how can we as a city actually have code enforcement that ensures that landlords are not running multi-complexes as though they're slums. And you can go all over the city and walk into places that are as horrifying as some of the pictures I showed you, and people at very low income levels are living there. So we have our work cut out for us. The mayor has asked that we at the housing department call a task force of the 8 different city departments that are involved in code enforcement. You didn't hear me wrong. It's 8 different city departments that are trying to negotiate the code enforcement. That's probably part of the reason why it's not happening as well as it should, and we're going to be moving there. Voucher mobility. I referenced the housing choice vouchers and the veterans vouchers that the housing authorities run. We've done some heat mapping on this and looking at Harris County as a whole and where these vouchers lie as it relates to where your quality schools lie. And you will probably not be surprised that the vast majority of places where the housing choice vouchers are being used is in places where you have your lowest quality schools. Someone who comes with a housing choice voucher, you're not a protected class under the Fair Housing Act. And so for no other reason except that you have a housing choice voucher, the landlord can say, I'm not going to rent to you. And that's all legal. And some places, they have chosen to make ordinances or state legislation that makes that illegal, but at the federal level, it's legal. And in Texas, the state has decided that cities cannot pass legislation prohibiting discrimination against housing choice vouchers. So that's the place where you're stuck. You can throw up your hands and say, we can't do anything about it, except that 98% of the apartment complexes in the neighborhoods where there are quality schools won't rent to housing choice vouchers holders. In fact, when I got to the Harris County Housing Authority, there were people on the wait list there that had been on the wait list for 8 years. They kept their data up. They come in and they got the voucher. They had hit the jackpot, and they went out to rent an apartment. And they went to one apartment after another to have the door slammed in their face. And when they realized the kind of neighborhoods that they had to live in order to use their voucher, they came back and gave us the voucher back. And these were people who were working families under the poverty level, 30% area median income and below. They could not afford to pay rent. And they handed the voucher back to us and said, I'm not taking our kids there. I'm not moving my family to the apartment complexes where I have to move. Now, not all of them. I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush here, but that happened enough times for me to realize that this is a real problem, and people are being forced to live in places where they do not want to live. So we have, as of this week, kicked off a new program where we'll be working with Houston Housing Authority and Harris County Housing Authority, focused on households with kids between the ages of 4 and 8. and helping them move to apartment complexes that would otherwise not rent to them, as long as those apartment complexes are zoned to an A or B rated school based upon children at risk. It's in the household's choice. It is not someone that is this is not a move that's being forced on anyone. But if they want to move to one of these places, this entity is going to be the entity to make it happen. I won't get into the details of how we got the Houston Apartment Association and the largest property manager in the city of Houston calling, asking when we're going to kick off this program. But that is actually happening, and we believe that this can be a real model for deconcentrating poverty using the housing choice voucher. A quick word about complete communities. The mayor has been talking about complete communities since he got elected. This came out of a conversation with the planning department around complete streets. Complete streets is the notion, as I'm sure any of you who are in urban planning know, that streets should be created for all users and not just for the vehicles that drive down it, but if you're a pedestrian, if you're a bicyclist, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're on a walker, streets should be, if you're pushing your kid in a stroller, your street should be created for you. The mayor heard the briefing on it. He said, I love it. Complete streets are great, but I want complete communities. And I think that's exactly the right response. So what does that mean? It means that communities that are affordable, healthy, safe, economically strong, that have quality schools, good infrastructure, that are well connected, and that are beautiful and interesting. That's a lot to ask for, but that's what we should provide people. Of course, the immediate question that comes up is, how do you prevent gentrification if you have a neighborhood that looks like that? And I believe the only way you prevent it is by some type of shared equity, like a community land trust, or a model similar to that, so that regardless of how good the neighborhood looks, you still have affordable units there. Because we, for too long, have been a city where our affordable housing plan has been make certain neighborhoods so poor, so environmentally polluted, so disinvested in that only poor people will live there. And it is time for us to move past that model. I'm going to click through these very quickly, but affordable community, diversity of income, no concentrated poverty, strong home ownership base, quality rental units, and energy efficient homes. Some of this may vary based upon specifically the home ownership base. If you're in an area where you have a lot of multifamily, that may not be an appropriate goal, but for a lot of communities it is. Healthy communities, grocery stores, healthcare, parks, urban gardens or farms. Safe community, low crime, low rates of automobile crashes. People always stop me at this point and say, how can you affect that? Well, you're in urban planning, so I probably won't get those questions, because you know that if you create the roads properly, you can actually reduce the number of crashes. You can make it safe for people who are out on the street. No unsafe environmental hazards. Safe places for residents to walk, run, bicycle, and skate. Economically strong. I won't read all of these. High quality schools, both at the elementary, high school, middle school, as well as vocational levels. Good infrastructure. Connected communities, not only public transit, but good roads, strong community and faith-based organizations, and access to services. And then the beautiful and interesting aspect of it. Public art, public spaces, identifiable architectural styles. We don't want a community land trust. We don't want the city coming into a neighborhood that has an identifiable architectural style, that has a real sense of community, and making it look like Katy. Katy's great. I'm not fighting that. But you want something that where you can preserve the history of a community. And it's not too much to ask your city government to help in that preservation. Here's one thing that I get asked about, and it's fair housing. Fair housing has been in the news quite a bit if you've been following housing issues in the city. And without going into a lot of details, I do want to take a moment and stop and talk about it. There's a reason why the Fair Housing Act was enacted. And there's a reason why we still need the Fair Housing Act. And it is not simply about low income. I grew up in a low income household. I lived my entire childhood without medical and dental insurance and all that. I can tell the sob stories. But there is something unique. It's not unique, but there is something that is particularly. Let me back up. You cannot address the issue of fair housing without also addressing the issue of race. And in a city like the city of Houston that has been as segregated as it has been, despite the diversity that we love to champion, if you go down to the census tract level, we are not nearly as diverse as we think we are. So that is something that I want to raise. I do not want to talk about this as though race is not an issue. It is. The neighborhoods that I'm in that looked like that, like the homes that I showed you originally, are African-American neighborhoods that have been disinvested in, that have been left behind, that at the beginning were contaminated, that were polluted, and that were shut, that had the city's dumps pushed on them. And so if we are going to correct these problems, we're going to have to be honest about them, and we're going to have an open conversation. The Fair Housing Act has a lot that you can't do if you're dealing in the world of housing, and that's where most of us have focused our time and energy. You can't discriminate based upon these certain categories, and it goes down the list. But we haven't really focused on, until recently, what we should be doing affirmatively to further fair housing, affirmatively to roll back the impact of redlining, affirmatively to roll back the impact of segregation. And that's the obligation that the city has. The federal government has made it very clear that it has that. And I want to be on record to say that it is part of our mission to address that problem. Too often, there's this dichotomy that folks say that it's we either have to pour our energy and effort into high opportunity neighborhoods, or we have to be putting our energy and effort into the disinvested neighborhoods. And I think that's a false dichotomy. Texas Organizing Project, I'm sure some of you here know that. I think they frame it about as well as anyone. It's the right to stay in the neighborhoods where you've been, even as those neighborhoods improve, so that you are not displaced from them. But it's also the right to choose to move to the neighborhood that's close to your work, that's close to your church, that's close to some other reason why you want to move there. And we've got to do both. It is not enough for us to choose one of those, but we've got to be entirely committed to both of those missions. The mayor's mission about complete communities is very much about ensuring the right to stay in these neighborhoods that have been underinvested in. The mobility voucher program is very much about the right to choose, making sure that people have the opportunity to move to the quality schools if that is a priority for their household. And so we're starting this campaign that says, say yes to quality homes for all incomes in all areas. Oftentimes we start these conversations at the point where we're ready to build something right next to someone's home. And then, if you've ever tried to do this, and I'm looking around the room at people who have a lot more scars on them than I have, you get community pushback. Let's start that conversation sooner. Let's start it from a positive perspective. It's not going to solve everything, but we want to be highlighting who it is that's living in these neighborhoods, the people who are serving you coffee in the morning, the entry-level nurse, the entry-level firefighter, the entry-level police officer. These are the people whose income levels qualify them for affordable homes, and we want that message to be getting out. What's next for the department? One is a comprehensive, data-driven, affordable housing plan. We owe our affirmatively fair housing plan to the federal government in 2019. So I'm going to be working over the next couple of years to prepare not only that plan, but weave that into a citywide affordable housing plan. Just to reference this, if anyone is following this, the president has announced a $6.2 billion in funding cuts to HUD. HUD provides the vast majority of the funding by which we do our work. So if that problem isn't addressed, we will be facing some severe cuts in the coming years. Our budgetary concerns right now, the current fiscal year's budget is just under $50 billion for HUD. HUD funds the City of Houston for community development block grants, home investment partnership grants, housing opportunity for persons with AIDS, and emergency solutions. If you're in the industry, you'll recognize CDBG, HOME, HOPWA, ESG. These are the sources. These are the majority of the sources of funding. Here's what it's looked like over the last 7 years. 33% a cut in our CDBG funding for the City of Houston. For our home funding, a 52% cut over the last 6 years. That's without the $6.2 billion cut. So that's under people who are friendly to this initiative. HOPWA dollars have actually increased a little bit, and the emergency solution dollars have remained constant. Here's what our budget looks like. $22 million. This is our estimated budget for the upcoming year. If the cuts go into effect, those first two items will probably get at least cut in half, if not worse. So $22 million CDBG, home funds at $7 million, HOPWA funds at $9.5, and $2 million for the emergency solutions. So that, I'm ending on just a very detailed point. I did warn you at the beginning, I'm a practitioner first and foremost, not the policy person. But a lot of these details, a lot of these facts immediately weave into the policy. Would love to engage you on that.
Thank you, Tom, for your presentation. Can you all hear me? Good. This is the chance for you all to engage in this conversation. So I've asked two of my students, Iala and Joy. They will walk around, unless you all choose to come to the mic. We thought it best that actually we come to you. So at that time, I'd like to open the floor to questions.
Yes, can you kind of go over just a little bit and have any of those cottages for $45K been built? Are they standing on the ground right now? Can you expand just a little bit more on that?
We're working with our first two families. The key is making sure that it's a product that people actually want. I sent 3 of our staff folks out to take a look at one of them nearby that was using the shipping containers as a base for some of the building. And the first question I asked is, if you were single, would you live here? And all 3 of them came back and said yes. So we're testing it. It's a pilot. If it works, if people like it, we'll do more of it. If it doesn't work, we'll pivot to something else that does work. We don't have them on the ground yet. We're working with the first 2. So this is something that we expect to have on the ground sometime in the next probably 2 to 3 months. Right now, one of them is in permitting. So we're waiting on the City of Houston's permitting department.
One last question. What's the square footage of
So these are, that was just a mock-up of an example. So that is not the actual designs that we're working on. We're looking at a square footage of between 350 and 400 square feet. So these are small. These are not, they're not the tiny homes, but they're met for one person. But again, does a one person need a full 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home if they want to continue to live alone? And so part of this is giving options to people, and options that are more than just, you've got to stay in the home that's falling down around you. And this does not stop all of the other initiatives that are going on. Those initiatives move forward, but for folks who want something immediately, we want to have an immediate response.
All right. Thank you for your presentation. I guess I would like a bit more clarification on the program you said that is designed where if families have children between the ages of 4 and 8 and they're moving them into neighborhoods with schools that have an A or B rating, what's the name of the program? Are they still taking applications? I'd like to help get the word out if possible. So
the program is going to be run by a nonprofit called NestQuest. It's funded by a local foundation. And the way the program works is they will have to already be a housing authority client. So we'll go to the housing authorities and work with them to get the word out to all of their clients that have children in their household between the ages of 4 and 8. I think between both housing authorities, there are about just over 4,000 households that qualify. we'll send out the word to them and begin taking applications for people who are interested in moving. This is an entirely optional program, but for those who want to take advantage of it, they'll be able to take advantage of it, and the nonprofit will actually be the renter and handle everything that deals with the landlord. The landlord will not actually be dealing directly with the housing authority, and except for dealing with tenant issues like backed up plumbing or something, they won't be dealing with the tenant issues, then the nonprofit will. So we're inserting the nonprofit between the housing authority on the one side and the landlord on the other to solve the issue for the landlords. The landlords seem to like this plan. If it's successful, our target is 350 families over the next 2 years as a pilot. If it's successful, I want to immediately fund it so that it can be available for the entire 4,000 households in our community to take advantage of. We're working with Rice University, some Rice University folks to do the data analysis as well as the data folks from the Ford Foundation, because we think that this could be very data rich, because you will be able to look and see how grades improve, how other qualities improve for the kids. It's based on research that has come out of Harvard University. The researcher is Raj Chetty. The reason why we're targeting the kids between the ages of 4 and 8 is because, based on his research, if children move from these lower income neighborhoods to higher income neighborhoods after the age of 12, it actually has a negative impact on their outcomes. And so we're wanting to catch them at an early enough age where being stably housed in that neighborhood for a period of 4 years would have the positive impacts. If they're younger than age 12, the impacts are significantly positive, and the younger they move, the more positive the impact. So that's the reason for the focus on the younger age.
Tom, I want to thank you for coming to my university.
Thank you, Ms. Provost.
You said that you were putting roofs on for $7,000. My question to you is, how many black roofers did you all use to put roofs on the house? My second thing is, you're speaking about building affordable houses. Do you have a database that consists of black home builders? And my last thing is, see, you smart white boy, you don't catch all this. A few years ago, HUD awarded $3 million to your department to, let me read it right, for to help the low-income public housing residents secure high-paying jobs. In that proposal, you listed my university, Texas Southern University. My question to that is, who are you communicating with on this project? Are we still in the project? Are you doing the project?
That last question is an extremely good question. Let's talk about it. I've been there since July, so I'm not sure about the details, but let's get the details and I'll figure out what the answer is.
I'm going to send you that in the mail so you won't have convenient amnesia. Okay, now go back to my first two.
The first two questions, though. So the first question was the $7,000 and who's doing them. We're working with Rebuilding Together Houston, and I do not have data on who's actually up there. On all of our HUD-funded ones, we have good data on both Section 3 and MWBE issues. So that MWBE is going to deal with who the owner of the business is, and the Section 3 is going to deal with the issue of who's actually doing the work. So we have good data on the federal government side. What I don't have good data from this from the nonprofit that I can give you today, but we are regularly, my inspectors are out there regularly looking at who's up on the roofs, and what I've told them is that they have to be hiring from within the community. And so that is the ongoing, if they're going to get any additional funds from the city of Houston, they need to be hiring people that are from within the community of where we are putting the roofs. Now, I'll tell you the two biggest communities where we have put are District D, which is where we are now, and District B, and the northwest and northeast areas of Houston.
Okay.
On the next one, we are about to kick off our significant rehab and our reconstruction, and that's where the real significant HUD dollars are going to come in, and it's going to be absolutely necessary that we are meeting the city's MWB requirements as well as maximizing our Section 3 requirements and ensuring that those jobs go into the neighborhoods where we are putting the money. It's our obligation, and that data will be there.
Okay, my last point. The word minority means losers. So how do you, as a smart lawyer and a community housing developer, take blacks out of the word minority? Put us in a separate class so we can be assured we get some contracts. As long as you put us with the minority, we're not getting any contracts. And I will be contacting you to see how many black roofers you have and how many home builders you have, because I'm going to supply your list so you won't have convenient amnesia. Thank you for coming, sir.
Thank you for supplying that list, because we absolutely need it.
Okay, I'd like to, Ayala, there were 3 or 4 hands I saw on this side of the room. So we're coming back over here, but to try to accommodate everyone, and I noticed the hands here. Ayala, will you just get those 3 or 4 people on that side of the room, please?
Hey, I have several questions. One, the cottage pilot program, is it exclusively for seniors?
Right now, it's exclusively for seniors and disabled individuals.
Okay.
That does not prevent us from, after we pilot it, from opening it up to others, but that's where we're focused.
You talked about the land trust. Do you know what the capacity will be? If you're doing currently, are there live programs with the land trust?
So where we are with the community land trust, we've presented to both city council and we presented to the mayor. We are in the process of working through the governance issues on the land trust, and I expect to have a response back from the legal department, if not next week, then the week after. What I've asked the mayor for is $100 million to fund the community land trust over the next 5 years. And just to give you a sense, I brushed over this. If we take that $100 million and use it the way we have been doing it, just building homes and giving the keys to the seniors, we can do about 550 homes, and the affordability disappears depending upon how long you require it, 5 or 10 years later. If you do it, and we've modeled this out with several different layers of subsidy, but if you do it within a community land trust, you can make 2,300 homes, and affordability never disappears. And going back to the 7 years of average residency in the home, over the life of those homes, you're going to be hitting about 10,000 households. And as they sell those homes and go into the private market, you're creating, if the numbers hold up, 7,000 homeowners, creating wealth in those households. So that's the kind of leverage you're talking about. 10,000 households helped through the community land trust versus the old model that we're doing it where we could help about 550 families.
Okay, only 2 more. Could you give us an update on the homeless initiative that the mayor launched a couple of weeks ago? And then also, you didn't mention anything about CHODOs and CDCs. And so if you could just give us an update on how you intend on engaging that community.
So the mayor announced a homeless effort, which we primarily fund, but I am not in the middle of, and so I will give you that caveat. That it is an effort that I'm funding the staff people in the mayor's office who are leading the charge on this. Over the last 5 years, homelessness has significantly decreased, but we started from a very deep hole, and we still have a long ways to go. In fact, some of the hardest to house individuals are still out on the streets. I drive past Commerce and 59 regularly. It's one of the places right across from Toot Suite where you can see a concentration, a tent city that we never used to see at that level in the city of Houston. So we still have our work cut out for us on that. The place where I am putting my energy, and it is part of the mayor's plan, we are not the service side of things, but the biggest impediment, there are many impediments, but one big impediment is having units readily available where homeless individuals can immediately move in and where you're not fighting with the landlord to house the person. And so that's where I'm focusing my efforts. I believe there's going to be a buying opportunity over the next 12 to 18 months. At least I shouldn't say I believe. I've been told by market experts there's going to be a buying opportunity in multifamily. And so looking for apartment complexes that are available, that can be easily rehabbed, that are at a size that won't have a negative spillover effect into the community. I suspect that size is somewhere between the 40 to 50, 60 unit complexes. So smaller size complexes where you can house homeless individuals, both chronically homeless who need the permanent supportive housing with all the services that are provided there, as well as the rapid rehousing where they don't need as much services and their homelessness is probably not entirely, but at least largely an economic problem. Homelessness is an extremely complicated issue. On the chronic side, the ones who've been out there for a long time, it is largely a behavioral health issue, substance abuse, mental health, but it's not entirely that. Especially on the family side, it is an economic issue. If you're spending 50, 60, 70% of your income on your rent, and then you lose your job, you're going to be homeless, and that's an economic issue. I should have said this earlier, but there's an easy way to dramatically improve the crisis of affordable housing in the city of Houston, and that is to pay someone a livable wage. That I'm getting a little bit out of my track, so I'll stop there. But that would be an easy way to solve the crisis that we have. As long as we continue to pay someone who's working full-time minimum wage of $15,000, we will continue to have an affordable housing problem in the city of Houston. And you asked about CHODOs and CDCs. We expect to be significant partners both in the community land trust as well as outside the community land trust with CHODOs and CDCs. If you are a city-certified CHODO, expect to receive an RFP sometime in the next 30 to 45 days where we'll have $3 million of our home funds set aside for single-family development specifically for CHODOs. It's meeting a set-aside requirement from the federal government, and we want to see that actually put into the hands of a community. A CHODO, for those, is a community housing development organization, and they were created, or an entity created by HUD specifically to develop capacity within the communities that you're talking about. What we've done for a long time is take that money and hand it to large multifamily developers who already have the capacity. And while it's an easy thing for me to do because I get to spend a lot of money very quickly, it doesn't accomplish what you're asking about, and it doesn't accomplish what HUD wants us to do. So we're going to go back to the original purpose of that and put it into the hands of community CHODOs. They still have to be certified, but who are ready to do single-family development alongside our department.
Director McCasland. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming, of course.
Absolutely.
And we appreciate the thorough overview. You mentioned something about deconstruction of poverty. Do you have a white paper on that, some type of, is that a plan, a proposal, or what is that, just an idea, or what?
So deconcentrating poverty, and what I was referencing there is the way some of our federal programs run that concentrates poverty in a single apartment complex, or concentrates poverty in a neighborhood, or adds to that rather than allowing concentration to, or allowing poverty to be dispersed throughout the city. Some of the numbers, and we mentioned race, there are a lot of poor households that are categorized by the federal government as white households. But those households are generally more dispersed throughout the community and therefore benefit from the zip codes in which they live. They benefit from the quality schools that they live in. Whereas, in particular for African American households in poverty, they tend to be more concentrated. And there are a host of reasons why that's the case. I'm not the sociologist here, but we can touch on many of them. And one of the things we're wanting to do is provide choices to those households who want to move. I do not want to be mandating moves for anyone, but provide them choices so that if they want to move, they get to move to the higher income neighborhoods. And so that's what I'm talking about in terms of deconcentrating poverty. On the multifamily side, two points I would make. There is what's called a Section 8 project-based program. It's project-based rental assistance. It's not run through your housing authorities. It's run by HUD. And these are the apartment complexes like Arbor Court and Greens Point that flooded. It was not originally built in the floodway, but is now in the floodway. Not the 100-year floodplain, but it's literally sitting in the floodway. It's 100% project-based rental assistance. Nearly every household that lives there is under the poverty level. So 100% poverty. It was flooded with 6 feet of water. And HUD didn't take any action to stop them from going in and rehabbing and putting those families back in harm's way. It's one of my highest priorities to help move that apartment complex, and in the process of moving it, to deconcentrate the concentration of poverty that is currently in that apartment complex. So that's then the last thing I would say on the deconcentration of poverty is, for a long time, governmental entities have brought economic development to underinvested communities in the form of multifamily apartment complexes, and wondered why these neighborhoods increasingly grew weary of accepting these apartment complexes. And it's not as though we're going to turn our backs on that. Multifamily apartment complexes need to be a part of the mix here in the city of Houston. They will remain a part of the mix. But when we go into underinvested communities, we need to start with the infrastructure. We need to start with the single-family development. We need to start with the parks, the libraries, the grocery stores, the other resources that community needs, rather than starting our infrastructure, our economic investment. I'm using economic investment in quotation marks there. We don't need to be starting with multifamily over and over and over again. As I've heard from some folks in certain neighborhoods, they've taken their share of the affordable housing developments. Let's spread the wealth. And I think that's the point, is deconcentrating poverty so that people really have choices on where to live, regardless of where their income level is.
If you talk to me afterwards, I can give you a number of readings related to deconcentration of poverty. Works by Mancy and Denton deal with that. There's a wonderful book called Poverty in Place by Roger Jagoski, and a lot of work dealing with Hope 6, the latest invention, for the most part, deal with deconcentration of poverty. So we can talk later about that. Let's take a question by our Associate Dean, Carol Robinson, on this side. And then we'll move back over here and take two questions.
I literally passed the mic on, but I'll tell you what, my question was related to the lottery concept you spoke about. A lot of the families that aren't clients of the authorities, who aren't even on the waiting list, I'm sure those that have kids would like to participate in the program beyond the actual 4,000, because we know there are more out there. But the second point, I'm going to be like my friend in the back. I got 50 questions for you, but I'm only going to do 2. You really didn't talk about tonight all the land that's available in the city, whether it's owned by Laura, the TERS, and what's going to happen with all that land. Will it be brought into the land trust concept, or where do those programs get folded in to what I consider some extraordinary good things that you have started moving forward in the city?
2 very good points. On your first point, it's exactly our goal, just like in the blue tarps. Once this goes out of the pilot phase, to have it funded at the level to where it meets the need. It's an incredibly cheap way to make sure that people can take a voucher and move to an apartment where it will cover the rent. The 98% of the apartments that I referenced, and this was based upon data that I pulled together when I was at the Housing Authority, but it's similar to the data that the City of Houston Housing Authority did when they were passing their ordinance before they were prevented from having an ordinance. These were all apartments where the voucher would cover the rent. These were not luxury apartment complexes. So it's taking a federal dollar and just making it more effective. And to my goal is, once we're past the pilot period, fund it at a level where it actually meets the need. To the question of land, you're absolutely right. We have an entity that's mostly city controlled, although there's county and HSD control on there as well. Entity is called the Land Assemblage Redevelopment Authority. It's the LARA board that Carol Robinson was referencing. And it has primarily acquired land through tax sale foreclosures. And it's done that, the concentrations are in Acres Homes, Southern Gas, and Sunnyside. Right now, the way the program works is, if you're a developer, you can come in, you can purchase one of those lots for $1, as long as you build a home within a certain period of time and make it affordable to someone who's at 120% of area median income and below. It works well for people who can afford mortgages for $200,000. So for that price point, that program is working. It needs to be ramped up, but it's starting to go. It is not going to be readily affordable for people at the 80%, 70%, 60% area median income. And those people can be homeowners as well. So that's where the Community Land Trust is going to come into play. Our department has been the only funder of LARA, and so we're working hand in hand with them, seeing them primarily as the land acquisition arm for the land trust. And I expect that there will be additional acquisitions that go far beyond just the acquisitions of the tax foreclosed properties. On tax foreclosure, because it raises a sensitive issue. Anytime you're coming in, it's usually a family that was foreclosed against. Not always. Sometimes it's investors. We were looking at Acres Homes, and this came out of our Blue Tarp initiative, when we saw that the majority of the people who had outstanding tax bills on their property qualified for a homestead exemption and didn't have it. And so I asked Linebarger, the law firm the city works with, to run the numbers on the 3 zip codes that overlap with the super neighborhood in Acres Homes. And those 3 zip codes alone, because just using the data of looking at mailing address and property address, not perfect, but it gives us a good estimate. We estimated 3,000 households qualify for the homestead exemption and are not taking advantage of it. So that's a problem that we're getting ready to tackle, but it's going to have to be tackling it, some of this door by door, knocking to people, church by church, organization by organization to get the word out.
Thank you. I'm going to add my thanks to everybody else's for you being here today. Really great presentation. Couple of comments. Really happy to hear about the CDCs and the CHODOs, and that's something I have a really keen interest in. I'll talk to you offline. But as you were talking about the Community Land Trust, which is something that I'm hearing a lot lately as I move about, I do have a question. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I'm really curious. A lot of the people that we help get into homes usually stay there longer than 7 years. And if for whatever reason they do stay longer and they pass away, what happens to the property? Do their families get a chance to inherit? I'm just curious.
So these homes are theirs, and the only requirement is that it be their primary residence, but it's fully inheritable to their children. It's a 99-year lease. Their ownership does not go away when they die. They pass it on to their heirs. And so that is the model as it has been used around the country, and that would be the model that we'd expect to have here as well. I mean, these issues raise sensitive issues, especially when you divide underlying land from the structure. It happens relatively commonly in the commercial world, where you'll have a division of ownership between land and the building, but it doesn't happen as common in the residential world unless you're in the Community Land Trust. But one of the things we're talking to some of the community organizers about is other models of shared equity, especially for current homeowners. So current homeowners that need a reconstructed home or that need significant rehab in the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of rehab on their home, maybe they're better suited for not the Community Land Trust, but a shared equity model where they still retain full ownership of both the land and the home. I've gone back and forth on this over the number of years. In a place like Third Ward, where you're seeing rapidly increasing home prices, a shared equity model is not going to work nearly as well as a Community Land Trust model. In a place like Acres Homes, shared equity probably will keep your homes affordable for quite some time. So it may be context specific, but we need to be sensitive both to the people we're serving as well as the communities that we're working in determining which tool is used. And my goal is to have as many tools in the toolbox as possible.
Director McCasland, thanks for being here.
Sure.
Quick question on land trusts, as everybody seems to be focusing on that a lot. It sounds great, and I've been doing some research on it as of late. It's been a model that's been around some time, like you, Dr. Lowe, spoke of. I'm just curious, once you start getting into the weeds of it, because it helps with land value not going up, and also helps with property taxes not going up, so it fights against gentrification. How will the city impact with that, with not having the revenue from the property taxes from the land trust? Will they
challenge that? Will the city not want to go through with it because of the revenues they may be missing?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on who at the city you're talking about. The mayor is very interested in it, so there's no commitment. Don't want to pretend like there is, but his word was move forward with this. Let's come back and figure out what our next steps are. But you raise an important issue. I want to just drill down on the tax issue. And if you're not into taxes and numbers, zone out for just a minute. But if you look at what happened in Freedmanstown, what happened in some of the Fourth Ward areas where we had a plan at one point, this predates me by a good number of years, but we had a point to preserve affordability there. The way we did that, preserve affordability in terms of home ownership, because the Housing Authority still owns some land over there, but on the home ownership side, we made the price point affordable, but then they immediately were taxed at the market level. And so they had to stay there for 5 or 10 or 15 years, and the moment they could sell, they had to sell because they were losing money on taxes. And so they took whatever nest egg they got from that sale and they moved on, and your affordability is gone in that neighborhood forever. On the community land trust model, if you get the right treatment, the land gets taxed. It still is paid by, the taxes are still paid usually, and you can tweak this differently. It's usually paid by the resident, but the land gets taxed at the value of the 99-year lease, which is usually, I think in Austin they valued at somewhere around $20,000, I believe. I double check me on that. Don't quote me on it, but it's someone else. Is that right? 20,000? Yeah. So extremely affordable level for someone who's renting or who's a homeowner. So and then the home itself is taxed at the resale formula value. So if you purchase it at $100,000, that's the level that you get taxed at. Regardless of whether it's a $150,000 home or a $200,000 home, you get taxed there. And because it is a specific, it's in this specific entity that's recognized by the state, that it can't be used as comps for the properties around it. So it's not pulling down the comp values for the city. The city's still able to tax the entities next door at the appropriate levels, but the home that's in the community land trust is affordable from a tax perspective for long term. And so that's the model. It's right now it's on a voluntary basis in terms of negotiating that with your assessment district. The city could make the property fully exempt, and that's a policy question. I wonder. I'm hesitant to say that's the best model forward, because if you're a homeowner, you deserve to pay taxes. We need your taxes. The mayor wants your taxes. But it should be at the right level. It should not be at a level that's going to prevent you from being a homeowner long term. And so I hesitate to go the tax exemption route, and I'm more inclined to make sure that the taxes are at an appropriate level and a level that can be sustained long term.
Good evening, Tom, and thank you for coming out. My name is Tanya Nick Smith, and I wanted to address Mrs. Provost's question to you, the third question about the partnership with HHA and TSU. Yes, there is a partnership, and our organization is called Enactus. We are currently being advised by Dr. Ford and Dr. Sonia Good. We have been going over into the community of CUNY Homes for like the last 4 weeks now, their residential council meetings, and asking the women what is it they would like for TSU to bring for them so they can benefit from the services that we're going to offer. So I just wanted to give you a little heads up on that yes, the communication is active. Like I say, we're working with Michelle Rivers with housing right now, and we are currently getting the program together now so that we can go full-fledged over into CUNY Homes and execute the program.
Like I said, I'm seldom the subject matter expert, so if you needed any evidence, there you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
At this point, what I'd like to do with a few minutes left, I'd like to start on this side of the room with the gentlewoman in the back, and I saw Don's hand, Kurt. Then we'll move to the middle, and with the time remaining, we'll end up over here to my right.
Good evening, Director. I just want to thank you for coming out. One of the things I wanted to give you accolades about is it's so refreshing as a upcoming graduate of the MPA program to see that our city is entrusting leadership with your background. I think it was insightful for me that you had been over the housing authority. You have legal experience. I think that's all important to make the changes that we need to see in the city. So I thank you and applaud you for that. My question is simply this. In District G, you see, I'm sure all over the city, but in District G, there are several large apartment complexes that are in homes that are neglected, that are monopolized by landlords that aren't even in touch with the community or even involved, and they derail the property value of these hardworking citizens, and it impels these communities to raise the value of their homes because several social issues which you have assured us the city is trying to address. Is there going to be an area, or have you directed a overview of how to single out these landlords that have neglected these properties, and how, as the city, are you going to approach narrowing down those eyesores and neglected communities so that other people in this room and in our community could redirect to enhance the beauty of the city? And then the last final point I wanted you to address is, because of your background with the Housing Authority, how are you addressing the issues that we I think it was in 2012 or 13, you did a lottery, primarily with the Houston City, where you gave out vouchers, and then just recently you did another one. But those people that are selected have a minimum time to find properties, yet there are no availabilities for those properties. So is this program really as effective as most citizens and taxpayers think that it is? And I do want to commend you, because I do like the fact that you are addressing that. You get a voucher and you have like 60-some days to get it, but you're getting slammed, the doors are being slammed, there's no availability. Don't try to find a primary school that you've mentioned that you're addressing with this nonprofit agency. It's just something I'd like to get more personal insight from you on. Thank you.
Let's take the last question first. The pilot program that we're doing, even though it's very narrowly tailored as a pilot program, there's no reason why it couldn't be for everyone on the Housing Authority program. Again, that's many steps down the road, but we have to address the fact that as a program, we've called it Housing Choice. It has provided some housing choice. I do not want to take that away. It's better than our old model of 100% concentrated public housing, but it has not delivered on the promise of choice like it should have. And I think this pilot program is moving in that direction. Your middle question related to, prompt me real quickly. Oh, the landlords, yes, the code enforcement. That is, when I didn't go into the details on the code enforcement, but right now, the departments at the city that are involved with code enforcement is the Department of Neighborhoods, Public Works, the Police Department, the Health Department, the Fire Department, Solid Waste Department, the Municipal Courts, and the Legal Department. The one department that's not involved with code enforcement on multifamily housing is the Housing Department. And like a fool, probably, I stuck my head out and said, hey, do we have a problem here? I'm going to volunteer to help fix it. We're right now having conversations that's focused on identifying 10 of the worst performers around the city and putting together a process where we can go after them, either on code enforcement, on criminal violations, on a whole host of issues, and begin and with three goals in mind. Either if it's a property that can't be rehabbed and therefore needs to be torn down. Hopefully that's the rarity, because we don't want to be tearing down more units than we're building. The second option is they get the money together to rehab it themselves, and if the city can be helpful in getting that money together, we want to be, or they sell it to someone who will rehab it and run it and maintain it in proper fashion. So those are our goals. I've hired someone to work on this exclusively that reports directly to me. We're working with Dallas, we're working with UT Law professors on this issue, and trying to bring together some best practices from around the city. I will tell you, though, if you are interested in this, read the book Evicted. And one of the things that you find in that book is that you cannot purchase the land for what the property is truly worth. And I'm thinking of an apartment complex on DeSoto Street where the land value is probably just over $1 million. And I can't purchase it probably for anything less than $5 or $6 million because that slumlord is grossing $1 million every year and rents a lot of it under the table. And until we find a way to fix that problem, these landlords are going to continue to run these apartment complexes because they make money on it. And that's the problem that we're up against. And as long as they skate just above where we can truly do good code enforcement, there's not a lot we can do. Now, I don't think we're truly doing good enforcement right now at the city, and so we're going to work on that. But that's something that we have to address. On the single family, I've not bitten off that piece yet. I've only been there 7 months, so give me a few more months. But that piece is primarily done by the Department of Neighborhoods, and we do fund their inspectors. We fund $2.5 million for their inspector salaries, and they're focused on that around the city. I'm sorry, not around the city. We're focused on that in neighborhoods, low and moderate income neighborhoods.
And there's some excellent models across the country. I'll just chime in here. In some cities, for example, where the community development corporation community is quite strong, they have even established housing courts that have taken the landlords to court with teeth behind it. So I think that's really getting into an area of policy that has worked in some other places. Don? Give him the mic, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Curtis, you next. When we get to that.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I was going to ask you, could you elaborate on how the job training component would be included into your housing program, as well as training opportunities for those young kids vis-a-vis maybe some type of STEM cell, some type of math, some type of computer literacy, how they would have access to those opportunities to improve their situation for this transition to bigger and better things?
Great question, and we do have economic development as part of our initiative in community development. So we are working with the Office of Business Opportunity. One of the things that when we get our single-family development kicked up and running, we want to make sure that folks who are ready and capable of running businesses have the opportunities to either develop the skills or get the technical advice that they need in order to build their company so that they can effectively work with the city. One of the things I warn people about, if you're going to come and work with the city, especially if they're federal dollars funding that, we're going to be difficult to work with. And so there's a need for some real technical advice there. And rather than just being reactive and waiting for people to come and having to mess up and then say we won't work you anymore, we want to be working hand in hand with the Office of Business Opportunity to provide them education and to make sure that they're getting the advice that they need so that they can be successful and grow their company as we grow in the city. On the issue of education for children, we don't have anything focused yet on that. Again, I've been there 6 months, so there's still time. But we are currently funding an organization that is exclusively focused on helping people get not from minimum wage, not from no income to a minimum wage job, which is where a lot of the efforts around homelessness are focused, but from getting from a minimum wage job to a livable wage job. And they're doing that primarily through certification programs at your community colleges, whether it be a nursing certificate program or something like that. One of the things that we have a problem with, we have the jobs, we are not providing people the education so that they can get out and fill the jobs. And some of this is coordination. So from the housing perspective, I want to be there ready to, and we're looking at where do we have community colleges where we can be buying apartment complexes, where we can be taking people who are on the Housing Choice Voucher Program or some other program, providing them free housing with an on-site child care and on-site food bank, so that you solve their problems, for their economic problems, for the period of time that they're getting their certificate. That's the kind of collaboration, the breaking down of silos that we have to be doing at the city, so that more of our workers are ready to go out and take advantage of these jobs. But that's a partial answer. It's not a complete answer. I'd be glad to have this conversation further.
Curtis, yeah, I'm not going to slight you. I promise I'm going to get to you, my brother. There was one other hand on this side before we move to the middle.
I did not know that you were had a JD degree. You become more interesting every time I meet you. Anyway, the city recently, or I guess it's your office, they recently had a LARA survey that went out. What information is that survey going to give you to keep the program alive or kill it, or what was the survey really?
Oh, the LARA survey. Yes. So they're looking at ways in which they can, one of the things I've challenged them to do is revamp the program, make it more effective. Some of this is policy decisions, and when you win elections, you get to set policy. That's one of the things that as a governmental bureaucrat, I'm very clear on. I don't set the policy. The people who won the election set the policy, and then my job is to execute on that policy and to execute in the most effective way possible. This new mayor who came in has made it very clear that one of his goals is single-family home ownership and supporting that either through rehab or new construction. And so I'm moving forward with getting them properly funded, making sure that they are well-equipped to work with the developers, to work with people who are wanting to purchase homes in those areas. So some of the, and I was looking at the mapping this morning, some of the tools that will be going up as a result of the survey you received is the ability for someone who's wanting, let's say they're in acres homes, they're wanting to live in acres homes, they're wanting to exercise their right to stay. They'd be able to go online and identify a LARA lot and say, I want a home built here, and then be able to connect it to some of the builders who they can work with to go and build there. It's that kind of coordination. So it's, we hope that it's an expansion of the program, and they have a significant role to play, as I mentioned, in land acquisition for the city. So that's the survey that was specifically for LARA.
Continued commendation on the comprehensive and thoughtful approach to what you're doing, and to the university and to Dr. Lowe for having it. On the community land trust, we typically talk about the land ownership development component, but there's also a social component that it can support. And as you go forward with this, I strongly encourage an expansion of the education and encouragement of that social component around housing. That is, developing co-housing alternatives, helping family transition issues when there's a death in the family. There are lots of things that the CLTs can do beyond that. The second thing, I really appreciate the fact that you're focused on affordable housing stability as well as production. And again, that's a lower cost, lower investment, high return, long-term return. A lot of communities don't think about it, and that's another thing that you have implicit in the policy directions that we all ought to encourage. We get stuck on the cost issues. The final thing is, as we move forward with the pilots, to not just focus on the square footage to accommodate an individual in the de minimis, but to really think about the relationship of the units to the surrounding environment, so that site planning and design are equally, if not more important than the de minimis accommodation of a human being.
I think that all of those are terrific points. On the complete communities, I didn't mention this, but the mayor will be in the coming weeks rolling out, again, some pilot neighborhoods where we'll be focused on. As soon as he announces those, we want to be doing some significant urban planning. Again, I'm not the expert on that, but we want to be working with planners who do have that expertise and on exactly that point. So all of those are great points, especially the combination of, or the need for us to be focused not just on the rooftops, and that's where the Community Land Trust, we expect to be hand in hand with the complete community effort, which really is about the entire neighborhood, building that social capital, the educational capital, the organizational capital, the human capital within it, and not just the sticks and bricks.
Are there other questions in the middle section to be raised? Certainly. Excuse me, Ms. Provost, we want to get that on the mic.
I'm going to give you my card, and on the back of it, I've written what I want you to add to your resource bank. You reference Rice, that's fine, but I need you to put Texas Southern University School of Technology, Public Affairs, and for the legal, Earl Carr Institute. So I'm giving you my card, my contact information, and I'll be following up on you. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you. We encourage collaboration. Again, I'm not the academic, I'm not the expert, but I love working with academics. All right, thank you, Ms. Provost.
Can we get that?
For the Earl Carr Institute, and you're doing workshops with the Houston Appraisal District on the issue on taxes. So
exactly.
Thank you for that. I'm glad that you all are making a connection.
Well, one of the things that's hard when you're with a division that has 144 people, it's hard to keep up with who everyone is working on. But I'm glad to hear that they are working with the appraisal district on this issue of homestead exemptions and making sure, despite the need for more legislative changes, we're at least taking advantage of the tax exemptions that are currently available for these neighborhoods.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you so much, Tom, and thank you, the audience, for participating in this program tonight.